Lisa had worked as a home care nurse for almost 10 years. She thought she had seen everything. Patients who yelled at her, patients who refused to take their medicine, and patients who cried every day. But nothing had prepared her for what walked into her life on that cold February morning. The phone call came at 7 in the morning. Her supervisor's voice sounded tired. "Lisa, we have a new case for you. It's a bit different from what you're used to." She explained that the patient was a man in his late 60s who had suffered a massive stroke 6 months ago. He couldn't speak anymore and needed help with almost everything. When Lisa pulled into the driveway of the small brick house, she noticed how quiet the neighborhood was. The house itself looked well maintained but somehow sad. The winter garden was neat but empty, and the windows seemed to stare back at her like tired eyes. The front door opened before she could knock. A woman in her early 40s stood there looking like she hadn't slept in weeks. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail and her clothes looked like she had been wearing them for days. "You must be Lisa," the woman said, extending her hand. "I'm Rebecca. Thank you so much for coming. I honestly don't know what I would do without help anymore." Rebecca led her through a living room that had been completely transformed, where there should have been a coffee table and comfortable chairs. Medical equipment now filled the space. A hospital bed sat where the couch used to be. Oxygen tanks stood in the corner like silent guards. The smell of antiseptic mixed with something else Lisa couldn't identify. Maybe sadness, maybe fear. "Dad is in the kitchen," Rebecca said, her voice getting quieter. "I should warn you, he doesn't talk anymore. The doctors say he might never speak again. The stroke damaged the part of his brain that controls speech." They walked into the kitchen and Lisa saw him for the first time. Robert sat in a wheelchair near the window, staring out at the backyard. He was a tall man, even sitting down, with silver hair that looked like it hadn't been cut in months. His left arm hung limp at his side, but his right hand gripped the armrest of his wheelchair tightly. When Rebecca said his name, Robert turned to look at them. Lisa was struck by his eyes immediately. They were bright blue and completely alert. This wasn't a man whose mind was gone. This was a man trapped inside a body that wouldn't work anymore. "Dad, this is Lisa. She's going to help take care of you while I'm at work," Rebecca said, speaking slowly and clearly. Robert looked at Lisa for a long moment. She could see him studying her face, trying to figure out what kind of person she was. Finally, he gave a small nod. Rebecca showed Lisa around the house, explaining Robert's routine. He needed help getting dressed, eating, taking his medicine, and moving from his wheelchair to his bed. He could use the bathroom with help but couldn't shower alone. The list seemed endless. "The hardest part," Rebecca said, sitting down at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold, "is not knowing what he's thinking. Before the stroke, Dad never stopped talking. He would tell me stories about work, about Mom, about everything. Now," she gestured toward Robert, who had turned back to the window. "Now it's like he's locked inside himself." Lisa learned that Robert had been a high school history teacher for 35 years. His wife had died 2 years ago from cancer, and he had been living alone when the stroke happened. Rebecca found him on the floor of his bathroom 3 days later when she came to visit. "The doctors say I should consider putting him in a nursing home," Rebecca continued. "But I can't do that to him. This is his house. These are his things. I need help. I can't quit my job and I can't watch him 24 hours a day." Lisa understood. She had seen this situation many times before. Families torn between wanting to care for their loved ones and needing to survive financially. After Rebecca left for work, Lisa found herself alone with Robert. The house felt different now, quieter but also more tense. She could feel Robert watching her as she moved around the kitchen, preparing his breakfast. "Good morning, Robert," she said, even though Rebecca had already introduced them. "I'm going to make you some scrambled eggs. Rebecca told me you like them soft." No response, but she hadn't expected one. As she cooked, Lisa kept talking. She told him about the weather, about the traffic on the way over, about her own family. She had learned over the years that talking to patients, even ones who couldn't respond, made them feel more human. When she brought the plate over to Robert, she noticed something interesting. His eyes followed her movements very carefully. When she set the fork in his right hand, he gripped it properly and began to eat on his own, slowly but deliberately. "You can feed yourself," Lisa said with surprise. "That's wonderful." Robert paused and looked at her. For just a moment, Lisa thought she saw something in his eyes, Maybe frustration, maybe sadness. Then he went back to eating. After breakfast, Lisa helped Robert take his medicine. He had 7 different pills he needed to take twice a day. As she organized them in a small cup, she noticed Robert watching her hands very intently. His breathing seemed to change, becoming faster and more shallow. "Are you okay?" Lisa asked. Robert looked away quickly and nodded, but something about his reaction bothered her. The rest of the morning went smoothly. Lisa helped Robert get dressed in fresh clothes and moved him to the living room where he could watch television. She noticed that he didn't seem interested in any of the shows she put on. Instead, he kept looking toward the hallway that led to the back of the house. Around noon, Lisa wheeled Robert outside to the small back patio. The winter air was cold but fresh, and she thought it might be good for him to get out of the house for a few minutes. "Rebecca told me your wife used to garden out here," Lisa said, looking at the empty flower beds. "She must have been very good at it. Even in winter, you can tell this was once beautiful." Robert's reaction surprised her. His whole body seemed to tense up, and his right hand gripped the wheelchair armrest so tightly his knuckles turned white. When Lisa looked at his face, she saw tears in his eyes. "I'm sorry," Lisa said quickly. "I didn't mean to upset you." Robert shook his head slightly as if trying to tell her it wasn't her fault. When Rebecca came home that evening, she looked exhausted. "How did it go?" she asked. "Fine," Lisa said. "He ate well and took his medicine without any problems. We spent some time outside, though I think talking about your mother's garden upset him." Rebecca nodded sadly. "Everything about Mom upsets him. They were married for 42 years. I don't think he's gotten over losing her." As Lisa drove home that night, she couldn't stop thinking about Robert's eyes. There was something there, something he was trying to communicate. She had worked with stroke patients before, and she knew that just because someone couldn't speak didn't mean they had nothing to say. She decided she would pay closer attention tomorrow. Maybe with time and patience, she could help Robert find a way to communicate what was locked inside him. She had no idea that what Robert was hiding would change everything. Over the next few weeks, Lisa began to understand Robert's world better. Every morning at 8:30, she would arrive to find him already awake, sitting by the kitchen window in his wheelchair. He never slept late, Rebecca had told her. The stroke might have taken his voice, but it hadn't changed his habits. Lisa developed a routine that seemed to calm him. She would make his coffee first, 2 sugars, no cream, and place it where he could reach it with his good hand. Then she would sit across from him with her own cup and talk about simple things. The weather, what she had seen on the news, stories about her neighbors. At first, Robert would just stare out the window while she talked, but slowly Lisa noticed small changes. When she mentioned her cat getting stuck in a tree, Robert's mouth had twitched slightly like he was trying not to smile. When she talked about her grandson learning to ride a bike, Robert had turned to look at her directly. "You're listening, aren't you?" Lisa said one morning. "You understand everything I'm saying." Robert met her eyes and gave a clear, deliberate nod. "Rebecca thinks you might not be all there anymore, but I can see that you are. Your mind is fine. It's just your body that isn't working right." This time, Robert's nod was more emphatic. Lisa saw relief in his eyes, like he had been waiting months for someone to recognize that he was still himself inside. From that day forward, Lisa made sure to treat Robert like the intelligent man he was. Instead of talking at him, she started having conversations with him. She would ask questions that he could answer with nods or shakes of his head. Simple things at first, then more complex topics. "Do you miss teaching?" she asked one day while helping him with lunch. Robert nodded immediately, his eyes growing sad. "Rebecca told me you taught history. Did you like working with teenagers?" Another nod, but this time Robert pointed to a bookshelf in the corner of the living room. Lisa wheeled him over to look. "The shelves were filled with history books, but also photo albums and scrapbooks. Can I look at these?" Lisa asked. Robert pointed to a thick album on the middle shelf. Lisa pulled it out and opened it on Robert's lap. The pages were filled with pictures from his classroom over the years. Students in graduation caps, field trips to museums, award ceremonies. In many of the photos, Robert stood with groups of teenagers, all of them smiling. One photo caught Lisa's attention. Robert stood next to a woman with kind eyes and graying hair. They were both wearing formal clothes and holding a plaque. "Is this your wife?" Lisa asked. Robert's whole body went rigid. His breathing became fast and shallow, just like it had that first day when Lisa organized his medicine. He pushed the album away from himself and shook his head violently. "I'm sorry," Lisa said quickly, closing the album. "We don't have to look at pictures of her if it's too hard." But Robert kept shaking his head more frantically now. Lisa could see sweat forming on his forehead. His right hand was gripping his wheelchair so hard that his whole arm was trembling. "Robert, what's wrong? Are you in pain?" He looked at her with an expression Lisa had never seen before. It wasn't sadness or grief. It was something that looked almost like fear. "Or guilt. Do you need your medicine?" Lisa asked, reaching for his pills. Robert's reaction was immediate and startling. He grabbed her wrist with his good hand, holding it tight enough to hurt. His eyes were wide and desperate, and he was shaking his head no over and over again. Okay, Lisa said gently. "No medicine right now. It's okay." Robert slowly released her wrist, but his breathing was still rapid. Lisa had worked with many patients who had anxiety attacks, but this felt different. This felt like Robert was terrified of something specific. Lisa decided to try a different approach. Over the following days, she began to pay closer attention to what triggered Robert's episodes. She noticed that he became agitated whenever she handled his medication. He would watch her sort his pills with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. She also noticed that Robert seemed fixated on certain parts of the house. Every day after Rebecca left for work, Robert would ask Lisa to wheel him down the hallway to his old bedroom. But he never wanted to go inside. He would just sit in the doorway staring at a wooden filing cabinet in the corner. "What's in there?" Lisa asked one day. Robert turned to look at her, and again she saw that expression of fear mixed with something else. This time she thought it might be shame. Lisa tried talking to Rebecca about Robert's behavior, but Rebecca was dealing with her own struggles. She was working extra hours to pay for Robert's care, and she looked more exhausted every day. "Dad's always been strange about his private papers," Rebecca said one evening. "Even before the stroke, he kept that filing cabinet locked. Mom used to joke that he was hiding government secrets in there. Maybe he wants to show you something in it," Lisa suggested. Rebecca laughed, but it sounded tired. "Dad can't tell me what he wants, Lisa, that's the problem. For all I know, he's just confused and doesn't remember what's in there anymore." But Lisa didn't think Robert was confused. The more time she spent with him, the more convinced she became that Robert was trying to communicate something important. His episodes weren't random. They happened when specific topics came up or when he was in certain places in the house. Lisa began bringing things to help Robert communicate better. She found a simple alphabet board that stroke patients sometimes use to spell out words. But when she showed it to Robert, he pushed it away. She tried picture cards and writing tablets, but Robert rejected all of them. "I don't understand," Lisa said in frustration one afternoon. "I know you want to tell me something. Why won't you try to use these tools?" Robert looked at her for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He raised his good hand and pointed to his mouth. Then he shook his head. Next, he pointed to his heart and nodded. "You want to speak with your voice," Lisa said slowly. "Not with cards or writing. You want to use your actual voice," Robert nodded emphatically. "But the doctors said your speech might never come back." Robert's expression became determined. He pointed to his mouth again, then made a gesture like he was trying to force something out. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. "Robert, are you telling me that you can speak but something is stopping you?" Robert's nod was barely visible, but it was there. "What's stopping you? Are you afraid of something?" This time Robert's nod was definite. He was afraid. "Are you afraid of what might happen if you speak?" Another nod. Lisa sat back in her chair, trying to process what Robert was telling her. He wasn't physically unable to speak. He was choosing not to speak because he was afraid of the consequences. "What could be so terrible that you'd rather stay silent?" Lisa asked quietly. Robert looked away, but not before Lisa saw tears forming in his eyes. That night, Lisa went home with more questions than answers. She couldn't shake the feeling that Robert was carrying a burden that was eating him alive from the inside. Whatever he was hiding, it was big enough to keep him locked in silence for months. She had no idea that in just a few weeks, Robert's fear would finally be overcome by his desperate need to tell the truth. And when that moment came, nothing would ever be the same again. 3 months into caring for Robert, Lisa began to notice patterns that worried her. His anxiety episodes were getting worse, not better. Some days he would sit for hours staring at his hands, lost in thoughts that seemed to torment him. Other days he would become so agitated that Lisa had to call Rebecca at work. The worst episodes always happened around the same triggers. Whenever Lisa organized his medications, Robert would start breathing heavily and sweating. When she mentioned his late wife's name in casual conversation, he would shut down completely. And every single day, without fail, he would insist on being wheeled to the hallway outside his old bedroom, where he would stare at that locked filing cabinet like it held the answers to everything. Lisa had started keeping a small notebook where she wrote down these patterns. She didn't know why, but something told her these details might be important later. One Tuesday morning in May, something different happened. Lisa arrived to find Robert already dressed and sitting by the front door instead of his usual spot by the kitchen window. When she asked if he was okay, he pointed outside with unusual urgency. "You want to go outside?" Lisa asked. Robert nodded quickly and pointed toward the backyard. It was the first warm day of spring, and Lisa thought fresh air might do Robert some good. She wheeled him out to the patio where his wife's old garden was slowly coming back to life. Wild flowers had sprouted between the weeds, and the old rose bushes were starting to bloom again. But instead of looking at the flowers, Robert kept pointing toward the far corner of the yard where an old oak tree stood. Lisa had noticed the tree before. It was massive and probably older than the house itself. "Do you want to go over there?" Lisa asked. Robert nodded, but when Lisa started to push his wheelchair across the bumpy grass, he held up his hand to stop her. Instead, he pointed to himself and then to the tree, making a walking motion with his fingers. "You want to walk there?" Lisa said, surprised. "Robert, you haven't walked anywhere since your stroke." But Robert was already trying to stand up from his wheelchair. His left leg was weak, but his right leg seemed stronger than Lisa had realized. With her help, he managed to stand and take a few shaky steps toward the tree. It took them almost 10 minutes to cross the yard. Robert had to stop several times to rest, but he was determined to reach that tree. When they finally got there, Robert collapsed against the trunk, breathing heavily but looking more alert than Lisa had seen him in months. That's when she noticed something carved into the bark, 2 sets of initials inside a heart weathered by years but still visible. "RM plus MM forever. You and your wife," Lisa said softly. "This was your special place." Robert nodded, but then something unexpected happened. He started making sounds, not words, but small noises like he was trying to speak. His mouth moved like he was practicing forming letters. "Robert, are you trying to say something?" He looked at her with desperate eyes and tried again. This time, Lisa heard what sounded like the beginning of a word. Take your time," Lisa encouraged. "There's no rush." Robert tried again, his face straining with effort. Margaret?" Lisa's heart jumped. It was the first word she had heard him speak. "Margaret," she repeated. "Your wife's name." Robert nodded, tears streaming down his face. Then he pointed to the ground beneath the tree. Lisa looked down and saw what she had missed before. A small patch of earth that looked different from the rest. The grass was thinner there, and there were small stones arranged in what might have been a pattern. "Is this where you buried her ashes?" Lisa asked gently. Robert shook his head, which confused Lisa. She knew Margaret had been cremated because Rebecca had mentioned it. But if her ashes weren't buried here, why was this spot so important to Robert? Robert tried to speak again, his voice barely a whisper. Sorry. So sorry. Sorry for what, Robert?" But Robert just kept shaking his head and crying. Lisa helped him back to his wheelchair, but she could see that something had changed. The effort of speaking seemed to have cracked something open inside him. Over the next few days, Robert continued trying to speak. The words came slowly and with great difficulty, but they came. Simple things at first. Water, tired, yes, no. But Lisa noticed that he never tried to say his wife's name again, even though it had been his first word. Rebecca was thrilled when Lisa told her about Robert's progress. "The doctor said this might never happen," Rebecca said, crying with relief. "Maybe he's finally starting to heal." But Lisa wasn't so sure. Robert's attempts at speech seemed to be making his anxiety worse, not better. Every time he managed to say a few words, he would become agitated and withdraw into himself. One afternoon, while Robert was napping, Lisa decided to do something she probably shouldn't have. She went into his old bedroom and looked more closely at the filing cabinet that fascinated him so much. It was an old wooden cabinet with 2 drawers, and both were locked with small brass keys. Lisa searched the room quietly, looking for anything that might open the cabinet. She found a small box on Robert's dresser that contained old keys, but none of them fit. She was about to give up when she noticed something taped to the bottom of the box, a tiny key that looked like it might work. Her hands shook as she inserted the key into the top drawer. It turned easily, and the drawer slid open with a soft scraping sound. The drawer was full of medical records and insurance papers, nothing unusual for someone who had been caring for a sick spouse. But when Lisa opened the bottom drawer, she found something that made her blood run cold. The drawer contained dozens of bottles of prescription medication, all with Margaret's name on them. Pain pills, sleeping pills, anxiety medication, enough drugs to stock a small pharmacy. Most of the bottles were empty, but some still contained pills. Lisa picked up one of the bottles with trembling hands. The prescription was for strong pain medication, dated just 2 weeks before Margaret's death. According to the label, the bottle should have contained 90 pills. But when Lisa shook it, she heard only 3 or 4 pills rattling around inside. She checked another bottle, then another. The pattern was the same. Prescriptions that should have lasted weeks or months were nearly empty, all of them dated in the final weeks of Margaret's life. Lisa sat back on her heels, trying to process what she was seeing. Why would Robert have kept all of his wife's unused medication? And why were bottles that should have been full almost empty? She heard a sound from the living room and quickly locked the drawer, putting the key back where she found it. When she came out of the bedroom, Robert was awake and watching her with a strange expression. "Just checking on you," Lisa said, trying to keep her voice normal. But Robert wasn't fooled. He had seen her coming out of his bedroom, and his eyes went immediately to the hallway, toward the filing cabinet she had just been searching. For the first time since she had started caring for him, Robert looked at Lisa with something that might have been fear. Not fear of her, but fear of what she might have discovered. That night, Lisa went home with her mind racing. She couldn't stop thinking about those pill bottles and what they might mean. She had a terrible suspicion forming in her mind, but she didn't want to believe it. She had no idea that in just a few days, Robert would finally find the courage to tell her the truth she had stumbled onto. And when that moment came, both of their lives would be changed forever. The tension in the house became unbearable over the next few days. Robert knew that Lisa had found something in his filing cabinet, and Lisa couldn't stop thinking about those empty pill bottles. Every time she helped Robert with his medication, she felt sick to her stomach. Every time she looked at him, she wondered what really happened to Margaret. Robert's speech was improving rapidly, as if the dam holding back his words was finally breaking. He could say short sentences now, though his voice was still weak and raspy from months of silence. But instead of making him happier, speaking seemed to make his anxiety worse. Lisa noticed that Robert was sleeping less. She would arrive in the morning to find him already awake, staring out the window with dark circles under his eyes. Rebecca mentioned that she could hear him moving around the house at night, sometimes talking to himself in whispers she couldn't understand. On a Thursday morning in early June, Lisa arrived to find Robert waiting for her in the kitchen as usual. But something was different about him. He looked like a man who had made a difficult decision. "Good morning, Robert," Lisa said, trying to keep her voice normal. "How are you feeling today?" Robert looked at her directly and spoke in the clearest voice she had heard from him yet. "I need to tell you something." Lisa's heart started beating faster. "What do you need to tell me?" Robert was quiet for a long moment, staring down at his hands. When he looked up again, his eyes were filled with tears. "I killed my wife." The words hung in the air between them like a physical presence. Lisa felt the world tilt sideways. She gripped the edge of the kitchen counter to steady herself. "What did you say?" she whispered. "I killed Margaret," Robert repeated, his voice growing stronger. "I gave her too many pills. I killed her, and I've been living with it every day since." Lisa's mind raced back to the filing cabinet, to all those empty pill bottles. Suddenly everything made terrible sense. "Robert, she started, but she didn't know what to say. "You found the pills, didn't you?" Robert said. "I saw you coming out of my bedroom." "I know you looked in the cabinet," Lisa nodded slowly. "I did find them, but I don't understand." "Why are you telling me this?" Robert's whole body was shaking now, but he continued talking. "Because I can't carry this secret anymore. It's killing me from the inside. Every day I wake up and remember what I did. Every time I see Rebecca, I think about how she doesn't know the truth about her mother's death." "Tell me what happened," Lisa said quietly. sitting down across from Robert. "Tell me everything." Robert took a deep breath and the words began pouring out of him like water through a broken dam. "Margaret was dying," he said. "The cancer had spread everywhere. The doctor said she had maybe 2 weeks left, maybe less. She was in so much pain, Lisa. You can't imagine the pain she was in." Robert paused, wiping tears from his eyes with his good hand. "She begged me to help her," he continued. "Every night she would hold my hand and ask me to make it stop. She said she couldn't take another day of suffering. She wanted to die at home with dignity, not hooked up to machines in some hospital." Lisa listened without saying a word, her heart breaking for both of them. "I researched it," Robert said. "I spent hours on the computer, learning about her medications, about how much it would take. I knew exactly what I was doing. It wasn't an accident or a mistake. I planned it. How did you do it?" Lisa asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. "She had so many pain pills," Robert said, "strong ones that made her sleepy. One night when the pain was really bad, I gave her extra. A lot extra. I mixed them into her pudding so she wouldn't taste them." Robert's voice broke as he continued. "She went to sleep holding my hand. She looked peaceful for the first time in months. She died in her sleep just like she wanted, but I was the one who made it happen." Lisa felt tears running down her own face. "Did she know? Did Margaret know what you were doing?" Robert nodded. "She knew. The last thing she said to me was, 'Thank you.' She knew I was helping her die, and she was grateful." They sat in silence for several minutes, both of them crying. Finally, Lisa spoke. "What did you tell the doctors? What did you tell Rebecca?" "I told them she took too many pills by accident," Robert said. "Margaret was confused sometimes because of the medication, so it seemed believable. The doctor said it happens sometimes with cancer patients. They forget they already took their pills and take more. And Rebecca believed that? Rebecca was so grief-stricken that she didn't ask many questions. She was just glad her mother wasn't suffering anymore. She never suspected that I had anything to do with it." Robert looked at Lisa with desperate eyes. "Do you understand why I couldn't speak after my stroke? Every time I tried to talk, I was afraid the truth would come out. I was afraid I would confess without meaning to." Lisa was beginning to understand. "That's why you got so upset whenever I mentioned Margaret, and why you were afraid of your medication." "Every time I saw pills, I remembered what I had done with Margaret's pills," Robert said. "Every time someone said her name, I felt guilty all over again. I thought if I just stayed quiet, I could keep the secret forever." "But you couldn't," Lisa said. "No," Robert agreed. "The secret was eating me alive. I started having the same nightmare every night. Margaret would come to me and ask why I wasn't telling the truth about what happened. She said she wasn't ashamed of what we did, so why was I?" Robert reached across the table and grabbed Lisa's hand with his good hand. "I need you to help me," he said. "I need to tell Rebecca the truth. I need to tell someone in authority what I did. I can't live with this secret anymore." Lisa's mind was spinning. She thought about Robert's confession, about Margaret's suffering, about the impossible choice Robert had faced. She thought about Rebecca, who would be devastated to learn the truth about her mother's death. She thought about the legal consequences Robert might face. "Robert, do you understand what might happen if you tell people about this?" Lisa asked. "You could go to prison. You could be charged with murder." "I know," Robert said quietly. "I've known that all along. That's why I kept quiet for so long. But I can't do it anymore, Lisa. I'd rather go to prison than keep living with this guilt." Lisa looked at this broken man who had carried such a heavy burden for so long. She thought about Margaret dying in pain and begging for relief. She thought about Robert making an impossible choice out of love for his wife. "What do you want me to do?" Lisa asked. "Help me tell Rebecca," Robert said. "Help me find the right words to explain what happened and why I did it. And then help me figure out what to do next." Lisa squeezed Robert's hand. She had no idea what the right answer was, but she knew she couldn't abandon him now. "Okay," she said. "We'll figure this out together." Neither of them knew that this conversation would change not just their lives, but also challenge everything they thought they knew about right and wrong, love and loss, and the terrible choices people sometimes have to make. The days following Robert's confession were the hardest of Lisa's career. She went home each night feeling like she was carrying a weight that didn't belong to her. She had promised to help Robert tell Rebecca the truth, but she had no idea how to do it without destroying their family. Robert, on the other hand, seemed different after sharing his secret. For the first time since Lisa had known him, he looked like he was sleeping better. His speech continued to improve rapidly, as if telling the truth had unlocked something inside him that had been frozen for months. "I want to show you something," Robert said on Friday morning. 3 days after his confession, he asked Lisa to wheel him to his bedroom, something he had never done before. Once there, he directed her to a small wooden box on his dresser that she hadn't noticed during her search of the filing cabinet. "Open it," Robert said. Inside the box, Lisa found letters. Dozens of them, all written in the same careful handwriting. "Margaret wrote these during her last month," Robert explained. "She couldn't sleep because of the pain, so she would write letters in the middle of the night. Letters to Rebecca, to her sister, to me. She wrote about everything she wanted us to know after she was gone." Lisa picked up one of the letters addressed to Rebecca. "Have you read them?" "Not since Margaret died," Robert said. "I was too afraid. But I think it's time." Robert asked Lisa to read Margaret's letter to Rebecca out loud. With shaking hands, Lisa unfolded the paper and began to read. "My dearest Rebecca," the letter began. "If you're reading this, it means I'm finally free from the pain that has been my companion for so long. I want you to know that every moment I had with you was a gift, and I am so proud of the woman you've become." Lisa paused, looking at Robert. His eyes were closed, but he nodded for her to continue. "I know my death will be hard for you and your father. You might blame yourselves or wonder if you could have done something different. Please don't. The cancer was stronger than all of us, and there was nothing anyone could have done to change that." Lisa continued reading as Margaret wrote about her hopes for Rebecca's future, her gratitude for the life she had lived, and her peace with dying. Then Lisa came to a paragraph that made her heart stop. "I want you to know that your father is the most loving, compassionate man I have ever known. In my final days, when the pain became unbearable, he made choices that I know weren't easy for him. He put my comfort and my wishes above everything else, even when it was difficult. If anything happens to end my suffering sooner than the doctors expect, please know that it was my choice and my wish. Your father loves me enough to help me die with dignity, just as he loved me enough to help me live with joy." Lisa looked at Robert in amazement. She knew. She wrote about it. "Margaret was always smarter than me," Robert said quietly. "She knew I would feel guilty afterward. She knew I would need proof that she wanted me to help her." Lisa found another letter addressed to Robert. This one was shorter but even more direct. "My beloved husband," it read. "By the time you read this, I hope you have found the courage to do what we discussed. I am not afraid to die, Robert. I am only afraid of living in pain for weeks or months longer. If you help me find peace, you will be giving me the greatest gift of love. Please don't feel guilty. Please don't blame yourself. What we are doing is an act of love, not violence. I will be grateful to you forever." Robert was crying openly now. "She signed it, your grateful wife, Margaret," he said. "She wanted to make sure I knew she was thankful, not angry." Lisa felt a mixture of sadness and relief. Margaret's letters didn't change what Robert had done, but they proved that it had been done out of love, with her full knowledge and consent. "We need to show these to Rebecca," Lisa said. Robert nodded. "I know. I'm ready." That evening, when Rebecca came home from work, Robert asked her to sit down in the living room. Lisa had offered to leave, but Robert asked her to stay. "Rebecca, I need to tell you something about your mother's death," Robert began, his voice steady but emotional. Rebecca looked confused and a little frightened. "What about Mom's death?" "She didn't take too many pills by accident," Robert said. "I gave them to her. I helped her die because she was suffering too much to go on." Rebecca's face went white. "What are you saying, Dad?" Robert explained everything just as he had told Lisa. He talked about Margaret's pain, her desperate request for help, and his agonizing decision to honor her wishes. Rebecca listened in shocked silence, tears streaming down her face. When Robert finished talking, Rebecca was quiet for a long time. Finally, she spoke. "Are you telling me that you killed Mom?" "I helped her die peacefully," Robert corrected gently. "The way she wanted to die." Rebecca stood up abruptly and started pacing around the room. "I can't believe this. I can't believe you did that. I can't believe you've been lying to me for 2 years. I know you're angry," Robert said. "I know this is hard to understand." "Hard to understand?" Rebecca said, her voice getting louder. "Dad, you committed murder. You killed my mother. Lisa saw Robert flinch at the word murder, but he didn't argue. Rebecca, Lisa said quietly, your father has something else to show you. Robert directed Rebecca to Margaret's letters. With trembling hands, Rebecca read her mother's words. As she read, her anger slowly transformed into something else. Not agreement exactly, but understanding. Mom knew, Rebecca whispered. She wanted you to do it. She was ready to go, Robert said. She just needed help getting there. Rebecca sat down heavily, still holding her mother's letters. Why didn't you tell me before? Why did you lie about it being an accident? Because I was a coward, Robert admitted. I was afraid you would hate me. I was afraid you would think I was a monster. Rebecca looked at her father for a long time. I don't think you're a monster, Dad. I think you were in an impossible situation and you did what Mom asked you to do. But I wish you had trusted me enough to tell me the truth. I'm telling you now, Robert said. Over the next few hours, Rebecca asked many questions. Robert answered all of them honestly, no matter how painful. They talked about Margaret's final weeks, about her pain, about the conversations she and Robert had about dying. Finally, Rebecca asked the question Lisa had been dreading. What happens now? Are you going to tell the police? Robert was quiet for a moment. I don't know. I've been carrying this secret for so long that I just wanted to tell the truth. But I'm not sure what the right thing to do is. Rebecca surprised them both with her answer. I think we should talk to a lawyer first, and maybe a counselor. This is too big for us to figure out alone. Lisa helped them find a lawyer who specialized in end-of-life issues, and a counselor who worked with families dealing with terminal illness. The lawyer explained that while what Robert had done was technically illegal, prosecutions were rare in cases involving terminally ill patients who had clearly expressed their wishes to die. The counselor helped Robert and Rebecca work through their complicated feelings about Margaret's death. Robert learned to forgive himself for the choice he had made out of love. Rebecca learned to understand why her father had felt he couldn't tell her the truth sooner. Months later, Robert's speech had returned almost completely. He and Rebecca grew closer than they had been since before Margaret's illness. Robert never faced criminal charges, partly because of Margaret's letters and partly because the district attorney decided that prosecuting an elderly man who had acted out of compassion would serve no public good. Lisa continued, caring for Robert until he no longer needed full-time help. By the end of that year, he was walking with a cane and living independently again. The last time Lisa saw him, he was working in Margaret's garden, planting flowers for the spring. Thank you, he told Lisa that day. Thank you for believing that I was still human, even when I thought I wasn't. Lisa learned something important from Robert's story. Sometimes the most difficult truths are also the most necessary ones. Sometimes love requires impossible choices. And sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is finally tell the truth, no matter how much it hurts. Robert found peace not by keeping his secret, but by finally having the courage to share it with people who loved him enough to understand.